Welcome back to our channel. This is Zoe. It is nice to see y'all once again. Going a little OG with the mask. If you recall, like one of my very first original masks that I ever wore, not doing the veil, not doing the face mask. So you get a little bit more this time. How are you? I'm doing excellent. So one of the things that I want to talk about this time around is abortion, specifically being pro-choice versus being pro-life. Let's talk about it. All right, the crux of this issue, no matter what, is going to be bodily autonomy. Like, period, point blank. That's it. Bodily autonomy. That's the only argument you need. You've won. Let's talk about bodily autonomy for a second. So, bodily autonomy basically says that any person is in charge of their own body. Whoever is going to use that body, however they're going to have access to it, it's up to that person. Period. Nobody gets to use your body if you do not consent to have your body used. It's an issue of consent, and that's really it. Now, let's kind of delve into this a little bit and talk about why some people might get confused about this or think that they have, I don't know, some pregnancy ought to have extra rights compared to the rest of us. So essentially, bodily autonomy boils down to this. If I am sick, a random person does not have the right to walk up and hook themselves up to me to use my body to sustain themselves. If the other person is sick, they do not have the right to hook themselves up to me and use my body without my consent. So somebody in a comatose state, you do not have the right to use their body against their consent. Somebody who's perfectly healthy, you're sick, you don't have the right to use their body. If you are a parent and you have a child, that child does not have a right to take, say, your kidney or plug themselves up to you against your will when you don't want them to. It's really as simple as that. There are a couple of scenarios that keep coming up in these debates that I really honestly get tired of hearing. So they go something like this. One is the violinist. If you're not aware, the violinist scenario essentially goes something like there's a celebrity who's a violinist and he's world famous and he is sick, and essentially some people capture you and hook you up to him against your will. And when you wake up, you're attached to this violinist and you're explained that you need that he needs your blood and your body and everything else hooked up to him to filter blood and whatnot in order to survive for the next 9 months. And if you stay there, they will pay for your bills and keep you comfy and everything else. And all you have to do is sit around for 9 months. Then you can unplug yourself and go your separate way. The dilemma is, do you unplug yourself? Now, what I would say is, morally and ethically, you can unplug yourself from... Let me calm down. You can unplug yourself from the violinist without being immoral, because it was never your decision to be plugged into him in the first place. And it doesn't matter how much money he has, how much celebrity he has, anything else. The fact of the matter is you were captured against your will and then strapped up to this person. If you say that you should stay or you ought stay and you believe it's a moral ought, what you're implying is that anyone who's wealthy enough, anyone who has the resources enough ought to be able to capture any other person to use their body as essentially a blood or whatever filtering system for themselves. No one wants to live in a world where your life could be interrupted at any point in time, randomly, arbitrarily abducted by some rich person or celebrity or politician that needs your body. And now your life is just on hold for 9 months while you sit there and just act as a human incubator for them, whatever, or filtration device. No one wants that world. The violinist scenario is easy. You absolutely have a right to unplug yourself, no questions asked, and walk out that room if they did not get your consent to be there. There's another similar scenario to the violinist where someone will say, compare it to a car accident, which I've used myself pretty often, because I'll say, what if it's unintentional? You get into a car accident with someone and you severely injure them enough to the point where they are going to, they need some type of emergency surgery or blood transfusion. Does the state have the right to take you and use your body, attach your body to this other person, even though you're the direct cause, albeit accidentally, for their condition? Does the state have a right to abduct you and force you to be connected to this person because it's your fault? You directly ran the red light, you didn't notice, you were texting, and you injured them in a car accident. Everyone would say no, for the same reason I just stated for the violinist. Because even though it is a tragedy when people get injured in car accidents, there are other methods that can be used to compensate that person or their family monetarily than to hook you up against your consent and use your body as a filtration device for theirs. So that's the first two addressed, right? That's the violinist argument, and that's the car crash victim. So let's talk about if you give your consent. What if you do give your consent to the violinist and you will stay there and be plugged up? How long should you have to remain after that? I would say you remain for as long as you consent to. The moment that you revoke that consent and you say, okay, violinist, I'm not going to do this, even if the violinist initially put out like a calling for people that could match their blood type and all this, etc., etc. You were one of the few people on the planet that could. You voluntarily agreed to do it. Then later on, revoked that consent. They have to honor that. You have to be able to unplug yourself and walk out. The whole point of consent is that it can be given or revoked at any point in time. It's not like some ironclad contract that the first time you agree to it, you're just stuck in it. Every single contract has stipulations for if you break this contract early, and that's all that would be done in that scenario. You thought that you would be okay with being attached to a violinist for whatever reason. Later on, you decide that you're going to revoke this consent, and therefore you do. That's it. There's nothing else to it. It's that easy. Let's move on to Destiny's favorite argument, and the argument that I hear all the time of personhood. That essentially, it's a pregnant person is pregnant with a pregnancy up until some point, and after some point, this pregnancy ends up becoming an individual person that can survive on their own, outside of the womb, etc., etc. And they say that the real question is on personhood, and they specifically point to at some point when the developing fetus feels pain, and then they want to grant it personhood. So let's talk about the personhood argument. This breaks down so easy, so many different ways. So first and foremost, we have no definitive definition. It's an arbitrary line about when a fetus becomes a person, period. The person making this argument, Destiny specifically, is essentially relying on blurring this line. The fact that you can't know when a fetus goes from like being just a developing organism to feeling things and thinking things. I think he relies on like an argument of the mind to say, oh, when does the fetus start feeling things? When does it start thinking things? That's when he wants to draw the line. All right. And it doesn't work for like several other reasons. Number one is that a pregnancy is just that. Until it is delivered, it is a pregnancy. It is relying wholly on the parent's body to support it. On top of that, when you look at the Constitution, because a lot of people say, oh, you have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, that sort of thing. And the fact of the matter is that the 14th Amendment, which is where they're pulling that from, says to all persons born have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, etc., etc. It says nothing about people that were not born yet. And conveniently, people that want to make the personhood argument leave out that portion of the 14th Amendment. It is not constitutional that somebody that has yet to be born has a right to the pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's just not the case. That's not what the Constitution says. And on top of that, the final death nail in this coffin, once again, goes all the way back to exactly what I talked about at the beginning. It doesn't matter, even if you grant the fetus personhood. No person has the right to use your body without your consent. And that goes for somebody who's 75 years old, 90 years old, 55 years old, 30 years old, 1 year old, 6 months old, pre-birth, at 5 months development. They do not get special rights, even if you grant personhood to them. They do not suddenly get special rights that give them entitlement to someone else's body. We don't offer that to anyone. And so we should not just arbitrarily decide that, oh, because this person is 6 months old, they somehow have a special access to someone else's body. No, the right to consent still exists. If the person that is pregnant does not consent to be pregnant, they do not actually have to remain pregnant. That right there fully encapsulates every single argument that someone might make about the personhood argument, and I think that absolutely decimates Destiny. There's no response that he has that's consistent to this. Every time I've heard him or his like goofy followers try to defend this or explain how they fail utterly, because they cannot get around the consent portion of this. It doesn't matter their age. Oh, and just for the record, he does often say, what if a random 5-year-old walked into your house? Would you murder them to get them out? That's what he says very often. He'll say, what if a child randomly walked into your house? First of all, it is blatantly, this is an emotional manipulation tactic. He is trying to implant in your mind a fully developed walking child that is its own autonomous person that has thoughts and feelings, etc., walking into your house and then asking, would you kill them? Well, the answer is probably no, because you're not just going to like kill some random child unless like we say like, oh, well, the child had a machine gun and was coming in your house to specifically kill you. I don't know, that might change it. What if it was a child that was a zombie? It was bit by a zombie plague, and now this 5-year-old is running your house to eat you and your family. Should you shoot the 5-year-old then? Destiny? How about that? Would that change your view on like whether you should like kill this person or not? He still has personhood, right? Anyway, dipshit arguments aside, I would say that it's very clearly an emotional manipulation tactic. And the fact of the matter is, even if you would not kill the 5-year-old, you would in fact have them removed from your fucking house. You wouldn't sit there and just say, oh, well, any child that wanders into my home suddenly is just allowed access to all of my stuff, resources, etc., no matter how many of them show up, and no matter what they want from me or they're going to explore. You would still have specific parameters for what you will tolerate from that kid being there, and when exactly you want that kid to leave your damn house. So his scenario and that, it totally falls apart. The solution to a child wandering into your house is not either the child is allowed to be there or the child has to die. That's a false dichotomy. In that scenario, you could just escort the child out of the house. You could take the child to an orphanage. You could take that child and find that child's parents. There's a bunch of other solutions besides the child either is allowed to be there or they have to die in the scenario that he offers. Because the distinction that he fails to acknowledge is the fact that the 5-year-old is its own autonomous walking, talking, thinking, feeling being, and is not a developing fetus that arguably does not experience some of those same things, and even when it does, is only at a very rudimentary level, and therefore does not deserve the same considerations. Unfortunately, that's just the fact of the matter. Let's go to the next argument that people use against abortion, where they say, like, if you make abortion legal, that people will just use this as an arbitrary birth control method. This is a very sad and unfortunately pathetic argument against people having access to abortion, because the fact of the matter is, most people that have abortions, it is not a decision that they weigh lightly. It is not something that they just rush into, and it's not something that they would definitely be using as a birth control method. Now, I don't care If there's one case that people can point to where this happened, it's not the average. And we're talking averages when we're talking people have access to certain things or not. I refuse to listen to the overwhelming exception, which is our own familiar person that likes to offer hypotheticals. A lot of people like to point to the overwhelming exception. That is a logical fallacy. All right, it's fallacious. If you have to point to the very fringe statistics of any one group and say that that represents the entirety of the rest of the group, you're being irrational, period, about that group. I will say that I think this is one of the weakest arguments against abortion, and it doesn't have any teeth, period. It falls apart. Nobody's using abortion as a birth control method. So let's see one of the other ones. Religious standpoint, I mean, who cares? If they're Christians, which they often are in America, I would just point to I want to say it's like Numbers 11, and there's some verses in there that talk about, you can just look it up. You can just Google Bible and trial of the unfaithful wife. There is a passage in the Bible that does not specifically endorse abortion. However, basically, if a man suspects his wife of being pregnant with a child that is not his, take the mother before the priest will perform a ritual and basically brew up some herbs, mix it into some broth that she then has to drink. And in the Bible, if she has been unfaithful, the concoction causes her to miscarry and she loses the child. If she was faithful to him, then nothing happens and she ends up being okay. If you read the passages, it's very clearly talking about an induced abortion or an induced miscarriage. Either way, that's the Bible explicitly supporting a priest offering a woman some type of test that then results in the miscarriage. And it also states earlier in the Bible from there that if you kill a man or you kill a woman, you'll be put to death, or have to pay X amount of shekels or whatever else. And then if you end up causing a woman to miscarriage, the amount of money that you have to pay is only a fraction of what you would have to pay for an actual person. So it's very clear that even biblically, even Old Testament biblically, they understood that a pregnancy was not a full person, and they acted accordingly. So that was bodily autonomy, which totally knocks it out. That was the personhood argument, which I feel is a very weak argument. We've covered the violinist, car crashes. We also covered religious aspects to abortion. I think pretty sure that's the major arguments. Oh yeah, that would be used for birth control. I think that's it. So I'm pretty sure that I have dealt with abortion pretty thoroughly. I don't see how there's any conservative or anyone else that can defeat any of these arguments I put forth. And even if they feel that they can argue against one of my points, I would ask that they take that into consideration with the entirety of all the cases that I presented. So that's bodily autonomy on top of why personhood is not necessarily relevant to this, and the fact that the Bible itself offers a methodology for some type of abortion, even if it's only a test for an unfaithful wife. If you enjoyed this content, please like the video, subscribe. If you have not subscribed, check out plenty of my other videos. I've got a lot of stuff that you could look at. Anyways, I will see you in the next video. Bye. Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.